broadcasting live from the Albay PIO News Center, providing you the most exclusive news update from all over the province. This is News at 12. In the local scene, the Department of Health Malinaw Treatment and Rehabilitation Center is expanding its bed capacity from 150 to 200 as part of a long-term plan to reach 300 beds before year-end. The expansion responds to rising admissions and growing demand for rehabilitation services for persons who use drugs and individuals diagnosed with substance use disorder across Albay and the Bicol region. Health officials say the additional beds will help decongest wards, strengthen patient monitoring, and improve the delivery of treatment programs. The project includes the construction of a 2-story Building B extension that will house an emergency room, detoxification facilities, male and female wards, isolation rooms, and quarters for medical and nursing personnel. Once completed, the upgraded facility is expected to enhance the center's capacity to manage emergency cases and long-term residential treatment, boosting the region's response to substance use rehabilitation needs. In other story, the Colyon Foundation Incorporated strengthened its partnership with the Albay provincial government to enhance the tuberculosis active case finding project. Governor Noel E. Rosal expressed appreciation for the foundation's continued support in advancing community-based tuberculosis screening across the province. Foundation officials also met with the Provincial Health Office Officer in Charge, Dr. Carl Hegel M. Ante, to discuss improvements in expanding screening coverage and case detection system. The talks included a proposal to integrate tuberculosis screening with paragonomiasis screening to improve diagnostic accuracy and prevent misdiagnosis. Health authorities said the combined approach will ensure early diagnosis, prompt treatment, and more efficient use of medical resources. Provincial officials remain optimistic that sustained collaboration and integrated disease surveillance will accelerate progress toward a tuberculosis-free Albay in line with the National End TB campaign. In other news, the Gender and Development Division aired a women leadership-focused episode of Tinig ng Kababaihan on Albay PIO Net TV. The program was hosted by Maria Teresa Berganza, Secretary of the Albay Provincial Council of Women, and featured Cristita C. Triomfante of the National GAD Resource Pool and the Philippine Commission on Women. Triomfante shared insights from her current and previous leadership role promoting women's rights and welfare across sectors. She highlighted key initiatives supporting women's empowerment and reflected on how advocacy work has influenced both her professional path and personal life. The episode also promoted 1 Billion Rising 2026 in Ligao City, with Albay joining the global campaign for women's empowerment. Tinig ng Kababaihan airs every Thursday at 10:30 a.m. on Albay PIO Net TV. In the national scene, several public figures at Trillion Peso March expressed both support and concerns after the Senate version of the Anti-Political Dynasty Act was presented in plenary, with the proposal seeking to ban political dynasties up to the second degree of relation and prohibiting family members from holding simultaneous or successive posts while counting local and national positions separately. Historian Xiao Chua welcomed the bill's progress, calling it a fruit of EDSA in reference to the 1987 Constitution born out of the People Power Revolution, and said passing any workable version now would allow improvements through future amendments. However, Cardinal Pablo Virgilio Ambo David argued that limiting the ban to the second degree of consanguinity and affinity is not enough, and urged lawmakers to extend the prohibition up to the fourth degree to truly address political dynasties in both national and local levels. Former Congressman Lorenzo Erin Tañada III also pushed for a stricter version, saying a second-degree limit remains too lenient and expressing willingness to fight for amendments that would widen opportunities for candidates outside political families. Trillion Peso March movement organizer Kiko Aquino D. described the Senate measure as a positive step, but said they would closely watch the House version and the bicameral committee's final draft before deciding whether to fully support the bill or push for stronger reforms. In other story, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa has lost almost all of his committee memberships in the Senate due to his continued absence from meetings and sessions. He was recently replaced by Senator Joel Villanueva in the Senate Committee on Justice and Human Rights, while Senator Robin Padilla earlier took his place in the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee. Senate President Vicente Tito Sotto III confirmed that De La Rosa has been removed from nearly all his committee posts, with replacements for his remaining assignments still to be decided. Sotto said the Senate is simply following its rules, which state that a member who has 5 straight unexplained absences from committee meetings may lose regular membership. De La Rosa has not attended Senate sessions since reports surfaced in November that the International Criminal Court has ordered his arrest over crimes against humanity linked to former President Rodrigo Duterte's war on drugs. Because of his continued absence, a civil society group called Wag Kang Korap has filed an ethics complaint against him, while Senate leaders are also considering changes to their rules to address repeated absences in plenary sessions. In other news, the Department of Education, or DepEd, through DepEd Order Number 003 Series of 2026 dated February 20, and signed by Education Secretary Sani Angara, has released new guidelines on the use of artificial intelligence in schools, stressing that teaching and learning must remain human-centered despite the growing use of AI in classrooms and offices. Angara said, the rapid spread of AI tools in basic education has moved faster than the government's ability to create clear and enforceable rules, leaving teachers and students to rely on informal and inconsistent practices. He warned that without a national framework aligned with existing laws on data privacy, content accuracy, and proper teaching methods, students face risks such as data breaches, misleading information, and unequal access to AI tools across schools. Under the new guidelines, which draw from frameworks of international groups such as ASEAN and UNESCO, DepEd emphasized that AI should serve only as a support tool, while teachers and learners remain in control of the learning process. The order also promotes inclusion and equity by requiring AI tools to be accessible even to disadvantaged students, to protect learners' critical and social skills, and to follow risk-based standards similar to those in the European Union's AI Act and the ASEAN 2025 Expanded AI Guide. And in the news outside the country, tensions between Iran and the United States are rising, with both sides moving closer to a potential military conflict over Tehran's nuclear program. Israel and Gulf countries see a war as more likely than a diplomatic solution, while the U.S. is sending a large military force to the region. 2 rounds of talks have failed to resolve core disagreements on uranium enrichment, missiles, and sanction relief, with Iran rejecting some U.S. proposals outright. President Donald Trump has warned Iran to reach a deal or face really bad things, while Tehran has threatened to strike U.S. bases if attacked. U.S. officials say Trump is still deciding on military action, with some forces expected in the Middle East by mid-March and further meetings planned with Israel. In other story, a record 129 journalists and media workers were killed worldwide in 2025, with the Committee to Protect Journalist reporting that 2/3 of deaths involved Israel. Most of the fatalities occurred in conflict zones including Gaza, Ukraine, and Sudan, and drones were increasingly used in attacks, killing 39 journalists globally. Journalists in countries like Mexico, the Philippines, India, Peru, and Bangladesh were also targeted, often after reporting on corruption or organized crime, with many cases remaining unsolved. In Saudi Arabia, columnist Turki Al-Jazeera was executed in 2025, marking the first state killing of a journalist there since Jamal Khashoggi's death in 2018. And finally, in the news outside the country with reference to the Philippines. The second day of the International Criminal Court hearing focused on the prosecution and victims' evidence against former President Rodrigo Duterte over his national anti-drug campaign. The prosecution argued Duterte planned a nationwide killing campaign through the anti-drug program, using police projects like Tokhang and HVT to target and neutralize suspected drug users and pushers, with basic lists marking high-value targets. Witnesses said killings were systematic, often targeting the poor, with police receiving orders and incentives to kill, while Duterte publicly encouraged violence and named specific individuals who were later murdered. Victims' representatives cited human rights reports showing thousands of deaths, emphasizing that the killings disproportionately affected marginalized communities and were carried out under Duterte's direct policy and oversight. That's the news at 12, February 27, 2026. We'll be back tomorrow for more news updates. Thanks to our news writer LJ Lorejo and Naomi Hernandez. And on the technical side, Chad Bobis. Our Provincial Information Officer OIC Marte Gonzalez, under the supervision of our Governor Noel E. Rosal. I am Mike Alvarez. Thank you for subscribing.